What's up everybody? Derek here with Minute Maintenance. This video I'm going to show you how to install KHC upper shock mount buckets on your Gen 1 Raptor so you can run Gen 2 shocks. Gen 2 shocks have a couple inches more travel. They're also a half-inch bigger diameter. Everybody said that it completely changes the truck. I'm really excited about this one. Okay guys, so obviously the first thing you need to do is chock your wheels, jack it up. The jack stand underneath of it, take off your tire, or your wheel, sorry. I'm going to be doing the front right in this side. The front left is obviously the same. We're going to take off our caliper. We're going to undo our tie rod and our upper ball joint. We're going to undo our axle. And we're going to kind of let everything hang off to the side. So obviously the first thing we need to do is get our old shock out. So I'm going to take the bracket off with the caliper all at the same time, and that's a 21mm bolt. And we're also going to hang it up off to the side so we don't put too much pressure on our brake line. So I just like to use some mechanics wire, it's called. It's just real flexible wire. It's pretty cheap for a whole roll of it. To hang the caliper up out of the way. Before I take it off all the way, I'm actually going to pull this nut, which will give us a little bit more room on our slack on our brake line. And that is a 10mm bolt. Then I'm going to disconnect my ABS, my wheel speed sensor cable. You just follow it up. It's attached up on the top with a little plastic clip. Pop it out of your fender liner. Disconnect it. Use one of these amazing little trim removal tools to pop it out of the tower. We're going to undo the little red lock. And then push and pull. Okay, after you get it off, I'll just run my mechanics wire through it. Now it's kind of tied up out of the way. Next thing we're going to do is take this cap off our axle. Just use channel locks. Don't grip it too hard because it's not real thick metal, so just a little bit of a grip and wiggle back and forth. Comes right off. And that is a 13mm nut. Once that's off, I like to push on the axle to make sure it moves. Okay, so that's free. I'm also going to take my rotor off. Okay, next thing we're going to do is take the nuts off of our tie rod and our upper ball joint. They're both 21mm. I'm going to use an impact. It makes it way easier. If you don't have an impact and the stud starts to spin, put a wrench on here and then a wrench up here, and you'll have to loosen it that way. So this will be to hold it in place as you remove that nut. Sometimes they spin. That's where an impact's nice, because it usually zips it off before it has a chance to really spin. Okay, now that we got those off, what we're going to do is we're going to hit the side of the knuckle where the tie rod goes in. We're going to hit that until this breaks free. Then we're going to do the same on our knuckle up here. Just make sure you have a hold of it. Then we're going to gently set the knuckle off to the side. We really want to make sure our axle on the inside here doesn't come apart. So I'll usually just push on my axle a little bit more, just to give it a little bit extra room. Okay, next thing we need to do is take out our shock. The nut on the bottom bolt is 30 millimeter. Okay, so my bottom bolt's out. Next, we're going to take the top nuts off, and they're a 15 millimeter. You can use a ratchet with a socket, or I like to use a ratcheting wrench for these, actually. And there is 3 of them. If you still have a sway bar installed, you're going to want to disconnect that. Your end link runs up about right here. I believe it's an 18 millimeter nut with an 8 millimeter head on it. And I just use a pry bar on the bottom of the shock. Just pry it out of the lower control arm. And the shock's out. I'm going to put a jack underneath my lower control arm just to support it up a little bit. As you can see, that boot's getting stretched out. I don't want it to go too much further. Then we got to take our upper control arm off, and we're going to pop all the clips off on top of your shock tower. Which again, awesome trim removal tool. Okay. And these are also 21 millimeter, the bolt, and there's a nut on the outside. There you go. Okay, so in order to get the new shock mount in, obviously we have to remove the old one. In order to do that, we got to do some cutting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the frame out 2.5 inches on this side and on this side. According to the instructions, it says to measure from the center of this hole up 1.5 inches. Then I'm going to mark that on both sides as well. And then we're going to cut right along this seam. After I get done measuring and marking everything, I'm going to go into the engine bay and check to make sure there's nothing behind this bracket that I really need to be worried about. The driver's side has some brake lines you need to be very careful with. I took a large chisel and put it between the brake lines and the mount on the other side just to push them away, so as I'm cutting it doesn't get nicked or cut completely. Obviously cutting your brake lines would be very bad. I'm also going to take a welding blanket and I'm going to cover all of this up, as obviously there's going to be a lot of sparks shooting out. So I'm going to do all of that and be right back. Okay guys, as you can see, I've got my welding blanket put up here. There's nothing behind this bracket that I'm worried about cutting about. I mean, the engine's there, but it's, you know, inch or so away, and I'm not going to go that far into it. You see the lines I made? So I measured here to here is 2.5 inches. That's the width of the new shock mount at the bottom. And then if you see it kind of curves up, that's because obviously the bucket curves out. So it goes up and then just kind of follow the curve up, and then from here to here is about 1.5 inches. So I drew a line there. Same on the other side. And then again, we're just going to cut along this seam in the back. Do this, I'm going to be using an angle grinder with a cutoff wheel on it. Worked really well on the other side. But for something like this, I can't stress safety enough. Be very mindful of where your sparks are going. You don't want to catch something on fire inadvertently. You don't want to melt something. You don't want to cut something. Wear gloves, wear long sleeves, wear a face shield, because you don't want to hurt yourself just trying to make your truck better. So yeah, obviously kind of do this at your own risk, guys. If you don't feel comfortable cutting, then definitely have a shop do it, or, you know, a friend who is more comfortable doing those kinds of things. let's get cutting. Okay guys, I think I got it pretty much cut. If you could tell, I would cut for a while, you know, stop, I would look, make sure I'm cutting where I want to be cutting. Obviously, even with my light right underneath of it, it gets difficult to see inside there. So just take your time with it. You know, after cutting through here, I could see part of my line. It's just easier to come in this way. Just watch out for your fender liner and everything. So now that it's about cut all the way, I'm gonna whack it with the hammer and see if it comes off. There you go. That's out. Don't need that anymore. There's like a real little bracket in the corner. It was on the other side too. I'm not real sure why it's there, but you can just, I think it's just spot welded in. I was able to just pop it off on the other side. There we go. Good chisel in there. Break it off. So now we will grab our mount and see if it fits. Like a glove. Cool. Okay guys, as you can see, it fits. First try on the cut. I'm kind of proud of that. Next thing, well, I guess one thing I should mention is the brackets have letters cut into them. P for passenger, D for driver, so make sure you've got the right one for the right side. Next, we want to make sure everything's lined up as good as we can. We're going to put our upper control arm bolts in. As you can see, I've got mine in. I did have to do a little bit of massaging to get it to fit right. The the old bucket that we cut off, the part that's still in the back, I actually hit that in a little bit. It's still not perfect, but they go all the way through with just a little bit of effort, so not a huge deal. Actually going to take this all back off. I'm going to take a flap disc on my angle grinder and clean up all my edges, and then I'm going to shoot it all with black paint just to prevent it from rusting. Obviously clean up the area the best you can before you start painting it. I'm also going to hit all these little surface rust spots that are starting to show since I'm already in here painting stuff. So okay guys, as you can see, I got everything cleaned up. You know, I smoothed down my cuts and painted it. Before I painted it, I cleaned everything up with brake clean, wiped it down a little bit, and then used some compressed air just to dry it all off. Brake clean works good because it dries really fast, especially when you hit it with the air. I've put the bucket back in, and I've actually used these bolts that KHC provides. Their diameter is a little bit bigger, so it's going to hold it in place a little bit better than the upper control arm bolts. I am still going to use the stock bolts when I put it back together, but these work a lot better for when we're drilling our holes. I've already got 3 of them drilled. I bought this for this job specifically. It's a close quarters drill. It fits in here real well, which is mostly why I got it. And as I'm drilling, I actually use a pry bar and put it behind the drill and just apply a little bit of pressure. And that prevents me from having to twist really bad to try to get it, you know, pressure on the drill bit as I'm drilling it in. The only problem with this is that it only has a 3/8 inch chuck on it, and the bolts that go on here are 7/16. So I've got the biggest drill bit in here that I can fit, which is a 25/64. A smidge bigger, I think, would fit, but I broke a couple. So what I'm doing is just running this through, and then I'm going to use a step bit just to kind of make the hole a little bit bigger so that my bolts fit. I haven't done that to any of these yet, but as you can see, it doesn't quite fit. So let's get this last hole drilled. Jeepers. So as you can see, without a good grip on the drill, when it pops through, it catches, and that's why it got ripped out of my hands. But when you're drilling stuff, you see those nice long strings that were starting to come off there. That's what you want to see. That means it's making a real clean, quick cut. It's the best way to keep your drill bits lasting a long time. So now we're going to try the step bit, see if we can't make these holes just a little bit bigger. Okay guys, I got all my holes drilled. Step bit didn't work, and I would not recommend it. So obviously it's a cone shape, and so, you know, we're going through some decently thick metal, and by the time it gets to the next step, you're making the hole in the bracket bigger, which we don't want. So what I did was I used a 27/64 drill bit, ran it through, and then just kind of augered it out a little bit, which I know isn't good for things, but that's how I did it. If I was to do this again, what I would do is I'd still buy the same drill, but I would get a couple of 7/16 drill bits, just, you know, cheaper ones. And then I would actually flatten down the part that goes into the drill so that it fits. Like on the bits I have, they've got kind of a flat edge on them. You can see there. So I would take and make that, I would flatten that down more so it fit in the chuck of the drill. I did get them to fit though, so not a huge deal. Next thing we need to do is bolt it all in. We're on the home stretch now. I did drill this back one as well. So the hardware that comes with it is this plate, which goes in the back. And then you've got there's two 1/2-inch bolts with 1/2-inch washers. Obviously 1 washer per bolt. That's what's going to go up here. Then the rest of the hardware is 7/16 inch. You've got longer bolts and shorter bolts. The longer ones are going to go in your bottom holes, and the shorter ones are going to go in your top holes. These will obviously go this way. And these ones, the shorter ones, are actually going to go this way. This is going to allow for your control arm to go all the way down without running into the nut and bolt. We're going to put a washer on either side of our bracket so that they bolt in correctly, or so that they're held in correctly. And then you've got 2 of these goofy things, which I spent a lot of time yesterday trying to figure out how in the world they go in. But on the back side of these brackets, there's actually a hole. And so you're gonna slide them in like that. And then kind of twist them until they're flat, obviously, and then you'll hold it over by your hole. There, I dropped it. I dropped one yesterday too. Not a big deal. This one's got a lot more gap, so this one's easier. But I am also going to put red Loctite on everything. High strength thread locker. Is it necessary? Probably not. You could use blue. I wanted to use red because this isn't going to come out for a real long time, and I don't want it to try to come out. So that bracket just kind of sits behind. If you're not super familiar with Loctite, we're just going to put a glob on the end of our threads like that. Get your bolt started, and you want to tighten them down fairly soon after you get them started, so the Loctite will start to dry, and once you move it again, it cracks and doesn't really work the way it's supposed to. So I started this one, and then there's that tab on that bracket. You can use that to kind of get the other side lined up. I did drill this one out, and it's just a smidge too small, so we'll widen it out the legal way. And then like I mentioned, these ones actually go this way. Make sure you put a washer on your bolt. Push through. Another washer. And then these are lock nuts, nylocks, so you don't need to put Loctite on those. That's why you want to get them all in the holes before you tighten anything down. It gives that bracket just a little bit more movement. Bolts go in easier. And then, like I said, the bottom ones, we use these funky things. A little bit of Loctite. Might be easier to actually start the bottom ones first. Otherwise the bolt kind of gets in the way. Of the fancy nut doodad. Okay, that one started. Put this one back in. And then I gotta try to fish that out. Oh, I think it started. So now I'm going to go through, snug everything down, and then when I tighten them, I'm actually going to tighten these first, and then these four. Then I'm going to go back through, make sure they're tight. These are going to be a 5/8 inch. You'll need a socket and a wrench, obviously, and then these are 3/4. Okay, guys, it's all in. Kind of like I said, tighten these top bolts first, worked my way down, then just went back over them. KHC didn't provide a torque spec. You could look it up. These are, I think, grade 8 bolts, obviously 1/2 inch and 7/16, so they do have a torque spec. I just gave them as many ooga doogas as I possibly could. Now I want to talk about your springs for the front. I did quite a bit of looking to figure out what's going to be the best option for me. I went with Geyser Off-Road for my front springs. I wanted a more performance-based spring. Since I do go off-road, I use this truck like it's supposed to get used. And Geyser, probably Geyser, seemed like the best fit for me. They are a progressive spring. As you can see, the word is upside down. So I reached out to a few people, did some research to figure out what spring is going to be the best for this. Obviously, it's a Gen 1. These are Gen 2 shocks. Am I supposed to use Gen 2 springs or Gen 1 springs? Obviously, the Gen 2 springs are going to be a little bit longer. Gen 1 springs are going to be shorter, but a higher spring rate because the V8 weighs quite a bit more. Nobody would give me exact measurements on spring rates and spring length, so I went with the Gen 1s. A very reputable company in the Southwest answered back and said that that's what they use in all of their conversions, so I figured it probably works pretty well. You can also use Eibach, obviously. I would just do the Gen 1 springs from them as well, but I'm not for sure. You'd have to do your own research on that. There's a company called SDI that's making, or that has made, a new top hat that allows you to run stock Gen 1 springs on these shocks. So that's an option you could do as well. I would not recommend using the Gen 2 springs. You can, but it's going to be a much lower spring rate. It's going to ride a lot softer, which maybe isn't a bad thing, but I think it's going to sit a lot lower than you'd like, because the spring rate's going to be less, so it's going to be squished more, which means you'll have to run a bigger one of these lift collars to get the look you want. Is it a huge deal? Probably not. These shocks, when I bought them, they came with these on it already. I just left them on to see how it sits. I am going to be upgrading the rear springs in the near future. They're going to be a little bit taller, so I'm going to run with these, see how they do. If I need to get bigger ones or take them out, then that's what I'll do. Before you mount the spring on your shock, take your top hat and physically put it up into the new mount, whether it's on the truck or off the truck. But these are kind of indexed. Two of these studs are closer together than the third stud. If you can kind of see, this one and the one on the right are closer than this is to these two. So if you just, throw this on your shock and tighten everything down, it may take some work mounting it up there because you'll have to spin everything. And then installation's just opposite of taking everything out. Upper control arm's going first, then your shock. Use your pry bar on the lower control arm to get that lower shock mount in if you need to. Little line from my face shield there. Get everything together. Obviously tighten everything down except for your upper control arm bolts and your shock mount. Your upper control arm has bushings in it, and if you tighten it just wherever you want, it's going to prematurely wear those bushings in there. It could possibly twist them right out, which you don't want. So just get your upper control arm bolts and your lower shock mount finger tight. Get everything put back together, put your wheels on, set it on the ground, and then tighten your upper control arms and your lower shock mount. Torque specs I'll put down below. I've got to look them up. Obviously, I can't remember that many numbers. But yeah, not a hard job, but definitely takes some experience to do. If you're even thinking about doing it yourself, I assume you've already got an idea of what you're doing. I hope I'm able to answer some of the questions for you guys that I had when I was looking into doing this. Like I said, I spent, I think, about a half hour yesterday on the other side just trying to figure out how those lower nuts went in. That was annoying. I was about to start cutting stuff to get those nuts in. KHC doesn't have much information on doing this, which, isn't a big deal. I kind of think they expect more shops to do it than just that, garage mechanic like me. But I hope I was able to prove to you guys that you can do it in your garage. I didn't use anything that you can't buy, nothing that costs a fortune. Floor jack. My garage isn't very big. The truck just fits in here, and I was able to do it. So if you're going to do the rears as well, there's another video on that. So I touch on how to do those. Real excited to get this on the ground, take it out, see how it does. I've got a trip, an off-road trip to Michigan coming up in a couple weeks, so it's really going to get tested. See how it does. After you drive it for, a few hundred miles, I would definitely go through and just make sure everything's tightened. There's a lot of changes. Definitely getting alignment done. I'm sure the truck's going to sit a little bit different now. It's never a bad idea just to get it checked. If you've done this before and I made some mistakes or did things very difficultly, please let me know. Let everybody else that's watching this know. Said it's a big job. There's not a lot of information out there on it. So I'm more than happy to accept some constructive criticism on how I did things. I'm probably going to make some of you guys mad the way I drilled those holes out and kind of augured them. But that's what I had to do to get those bolts to fit. Am I happy I had to do it that way? No, not really. But this is my only vehicle, so I kind of needed to get around. On that, it did take me about 8 hours to do everything. So I would plan a weekend where you don't need to go anywhere, or you've got another vehicle you can use if you need to. So, yeah. Any questions, leave them below. I'll answer them as best I can. Like I said, comments are always welcome. Give the video a like and share it with your friends. Give us a follow. That's it for this one, guys.